It's war, but not with tanks and guns. This time, tariffs and Twitter feeds, the ammunition in the latest escalation of a bitter trade dispute between the US and China.
We aren't looking at a broad and deep market sell-off. We're looking at all of the majors off by some 2% or more. And in fact,
markets reeled as Beijing reacted to the latest bout of US tariffs by fighting back, hiking taxes on $60 billion worth of key American imports. Think beans to Budweiser. The two premiers had been on course to bury the hatchet, but late last week talks broke down after China's president Xi Jinping declared he wouldn't give in to President Trump's demands to enshrine new trade laws. The deal called off, President Trump resorted to his favourite negotiation tool, not talks, but tariffs.
China will have to retaliate because President Xi Jinping cannot afford to appear that he allows himself to be bullied by the Trump administration.
Overnight, $200 billion worth of Chinese goods hit with an extra 25% of import taxes. This, even as he simultaneously described talks with the Chinese president as candid and constructive and said his relationship with President Xi was very strong. But not that strong. The next day, the Beijing bashing ramped up. "I know I'm going to win, and I love collecting big tariffs," Trump tweeted. And this morning it continued with a warning to President Xi. China will be hurt very badly if you don't make a deal. And China should not retaliate. It will only get worse. But retaliate they did. Earlier, an official saying this.
China will never surrender to external pressure. We have the determination and the ability to safeguard our legitimate rights and interests. China has to take countermeasures.
In simple English, Washington woke up to the news that $60 billion worth of US goods, roughly 4,000 products, would face tit-for-tat tariffs. Farmers targeted with hikes on foods like meat, honey and fruit juices. Iconic brands like Budweiser and the Californian wine industry also hit. And the list includes hundreds of consumer goods, things like books, cameras and even Mr. Trump's treasured golf clubs. Nobody's a winner in a trade war, and while the US economy and manufacturers will inevitably take a hit, China arguably stands to be worse off given the sheer volume of products it exports to the US, roughly 4 times as much as trade going in the opposite direction. Now, the Chinese economy was already slowing, but a protracted trade battle could potentially make things worse. And ironically, if things get worse for China, then the US and the world economy suffers too. So it's in everybody's interest that the two sides agree some form of deal.
The Chinese have never really fully trusted the Americans. They know that at some stage the Americans will respond in a negative way to the rise of China. So they are not totally surprised, but they would have preferred this to come rather a bit later, so one say.
As for any immediate thawing, little hope. President Trump has already threatened to slap his 25% tariff on a further $300 billion worth of Chinese imports. A move that would no doubt attract yet more tit-for-tat taxes from Beijing.
Siobhan Kennedy reporting. Well, joining us now is Dr. Yu Jie, who researches China's economic diplomacy at Chatham House and who returned, indeed, from China overnight, and Martin Jakes, a senior fellow at the Department of Politics and International Studies at Cambridge University and a visiting professor at Tsinghua University in Beijing. Let me just ask you, Dr. Yu Jie, I mean, we've known this has been rumbling along for some time, at least almost since Trump became president. Now it's flared. Is it a surprise?
Well, thank you, John, for having me. I think from the Chinese leadership point of view, this is not a surprise at all, because trade war is only one single element for the comprehensive deterioration of US-China relations. So this doesn't come as a surprise. But what really comes as a surprise is why suddenly, in the last moment, as if the two sides are going to achieve a deal, and Donald Trump have something different to offer.
Well, is this, Martin Jakes, about Donald Trump's regime, if you like, or is it actually an endemic problem between America and China?
Well, the point of departure is undoubtedly Trump's regime. That's the reason why the relations have deteriorated so markedly over the last period. But I think you've got to see it against a wider backdrop, because it's not just the Republicans. If anything, the Democrats are at least as enthusiastic about protectionism against China as the Republicans. So I think in a much broader way, what is this about? I think it's about America finally coming to the view that the rise of China is a threat to it and a threat to its position in the world, and it wants to try and do something about it.
Is that how you read it?
Well, what I read it is there's a certain element of US-China relations we can discuss in here endlessly. But one of the key things which really alarmed the United States is China's quest to global technology brilliance and supremacy. And having said that, an American always consider technology has to be monopolized by the United States and its allies. But however, China is setting the total opposite example, but acquire those technologies, and therefore there's perhaps the last chance to offer the technology blockade towards Beijing.
But does this conflict hurt China more than America?
Depends how you're counting the numbers game in here. I mean, part of the reason some of the Chinese reformers even cheered for Donald Trump, because precisely if we are talking about China's next step of economic reform, and partially what Donald Trump has asked is what really China's direction would go for in the future. So it depends how you read the signals in here.
How do we move from here? I mean, is this going to tumble markets and the rest of it? I mean, are we all in for a rough time, or will they resolve it somehow?
It's possible that there will be some kind of deal, but I don't think it'll stick. And even if, you know, we might limp from one deal to another, but now constantly, if you look at Trump, I think it'll be under attack. They'll be trying to change the rules and so on. So we're entering a new period of instability in the relationship between China and the United States, which is going to profoundly affect everyone in the world, the global economy, and certainly, and including ourselves, and certainly affect China and the United States. In the long run, the loser is going to be the United States.
Or is it going to be all of us? I mean...
Well, we're all going to lose, but in the relationship between the two.
You laugh.
Well, I mean, in the long run, we will die, like someone else said. But overall, I think the key thing is in here, we shall realize the international order has certainly changed after 1989, and now we're in that turning point. And whether China be able to fulfill that vacancy, I still have some doubt, because ideas matters. Because so far, for the moment, China hasn't really produced the ideas that really make the rest of the world would like to follow China.
Where does it leave Britain in the middle? I mean, you take an issue like Huawei.
Sure.
We're just about to start big-time investment with them.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, unfortunately, Britain will really have to make the multiple-choice game to facing the economic reality, whether they would like counting China as an economic partner, or on the other hand, still closely following the United States as a security alliances. And that's ultimately is going to make that choice, not just for Britain, but for many other medium-range powers as well.
That's quite a moment.
Yes, I mean, but I think that, you know, you've seen this process for some time now, the rise of China.
Do you actually see Britain and Europe, for example, taking a different course from that of America?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think it's complicated, and it'll be, you know, there'll be many twists and turns. But if you look at Belt and Road, which is probably the most interesting barometer in this context, now over half the countries in the world are participating in some form or another in Belt and Road. And if you look at Europe, well, for some time now, Eastern and Central Europe have been part of the 16+1 arrangement with China, and they are looking to China. Then Greece has signed up for it. Recently, Italy signed a memorandum of understanding. So really, we're now talking, relatively speaking, about the hardcore West European countries.
Well, so the story's only just begun.
Exactly.
Dr. Yu Jie, thank you very much indeed. Martin Jakes, thank you.